Have you ever wondered what the secret sauce is to buying a condo unit in Toronto? Not the typical stuff that everybody already talks about and knows about, such as location, proximity to grocery stores, schools, amenities in the area, the amenities within the building, the status certificate review, maintenance fees, yada, yada, yada. All of that stuff is super important, don't get me wrong. Those are the criteria that you look at when you're buying a condo. But there are finer, more subtle things that you want to look out for that add that cherry on top, that help a unit be able to sell in no matter what market it is. Cool, hot, doesn't matter. They sell faster, they sell for more money, and there's always demand for those. Well, anyways, if you wanted a checklist and you ever wonder no more, because I'm here to spill the beans and share all of the secret sauce. What's up, guys? My name is Mila Sheina. I've been in real estate for over 6 years. I've personally moved over a dozen times. I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly with houses and condos. I know what works and what doesn't. But more importantly, I've shown thousands of places to my personal clients over the years. And I hear real people, real-time feedback, which by nature of this job gives you kind of a compilation of what works for most people and what doesn't. So this is super exciting for me to share with you guys. I've looked online and a lot of this stuff isn't compiled into one list, so I'm excited to present this. If this type of content is relevant and interesting to you, press that subscribe button and click on the bell below to be notified anytime I post a new real estate video. All right, let's dive right in. And the first point I want to talk about is a big pain point for a lot of people is elevators. Elevators can make or break your experience in a condo. I have waited for 30 minutes to go up to an elevator. I've been late to my appointments because there's issues with elevators in buildings, and it's just such a struggle if they're not functioning correctly. So the general rule of thumb is that you want to have one elevator servicing 9 to 10 floors or 50 to 60 units. For example, if you have a 50-story building, you want to have a minimum of 5 elevators servicing that building. That helps keep things running smoothly, and somebody needs to move in or out, you have one elevator on service, you still have 4 elevators servicing the building. Nothing is worse than when your dog has to go poo outside and you have to wait 10 minutes, or if you're rushing to work in the morning and you need to get to your car in the garage and you can't get to it in time because your elevator system is not functioning properly and is overloaded. Ugh, it just gives me, just thinking about it. So yeah. Now you know, check how many stories there are in a building, check how many elevators they have, and you'll have a pretty good idea of whether or not there are problems with those elevators. Balconies. Balconies are an interesting topic to cover in general with condos because it is not owned by you. So here's a fun fact of the day. You own your unit and you have exclusive right to use the balcony, but the balcony doesn't belong to you. It belongs to the condo corp, and they can dictate what you do and don't put on your balcony. So having said that, there are 3 major types of balconies that you can encounter when you're looking at properties. You've got Juliet balconies, you've got your regular open balconies, and you've got terraces, okay? So in my personal experience, Juliet balconies and regular open balconies, they don't necessarily add any particular value. Obviously, for you as an end user, when you're moving in, you want to consider whether or not a balcony is something that's important to you. Are you a smoker? Do you want to be outside on the patio? Is it even feasible to be on a patio? Like, I've had balconies always in my life. I never use them, but I like to know that they're there and I can walk out on this balcony at any point. But I've never had furniture on my balconies. It's just too windy and too dusty to sit, especially downtown Toronto. But for a lot of people, this is an important point. Now, when you get into the terraces, now you're getting into value add. So you will be paying a premium for a terrace, again, depending on the size, of course. And when you're selling, you're also going to warrant a premium for getting that terrace sold. I don't want to say any numbers, but I have calculated as much as $300 per square foot for terraces, but we don't do the same thing for balconies. So it's just an interesting little quirk of Toronto real estate market. Here's a point worth making about balconies, by the way, and that is that when you don't have a balcony or have a Juliet balcony, those units are typically a little bit harder to move. I won't say that they're hard to move in general. In Toronto, nothing really is hard to move if you price it right, but people typically prefer units that have open balconies or terraces over units that don't have balconies or have Juliet balconies. So the next point on our roster is the views. And the view seems to be a big pain point for a lot of people, which is funny a little bit because Toronto has the most cranes up in the sky at any given point in time, more than anywhere in the world, which means we have a ton of construction going on. So even if you have a view when you're buying a property, that view is not guaranteed most of the time. Of course, there are exceptions to this. There are properties that have forever views, and those demand a very hefty premium. But generally, if you have an unobstructed view, especially if you're facing the lake and especially if you're facing the CN Tower, oh my goodness, you're paying a good premium. It's expensive. As a general rule of thumb though, southwestern exposures seem to be the most desirable exposures, northern exposures being the least desirable exposures. And even if there is a building in front of you, as long as it's not in your face where your neighbor can see you walking around in your underwear, but they're far enough away for it to not feel like really personal, you're usually good. But there are plenty of buildings that are this close. And of course, those are not the greatest value-wise. If this video is resonating and is interesting for you, like my video and let me know in the comments below, what are the most important things for you when looking for a condo? Parking. Parking is a great convenience. I'm going to be the first person to tell you that. I'm a car girl. I drive everywhere, even though I live downtown and I can walk to every single place. But did you know that owning a parking spot is actually more expensive than just renting it within the building? So let me explain. Today's rates for parking spaces in downtown condos go from anywhere between like $50,000 to $70,000 on average. And with higher end and newer buildings, you're looking at like $100,000, $150,000, even some pre-construction projects are charging for these parking spaces. So to finance a $50,000 parking space at 5.5%, I believe I just did the math, you're looking at $308 a month. If it's a $70,000 parking spot, like that's more like $400 something. And that's not inclusive of the maintenance fees that you pay for the parking spot when you own it. And I've seen as low as $13 a month for the parking space maintenance to as high as $150 plus per month, which makes it very unfeasible very quickly, especially given that to rent a parking space downtown Toronto costs you anywhere between $250 and like $350 a month. So when you look at it from that perspective, you realize that, maybe I don't need a parking space in my unit after all. To think about. Next up, we have the actual layout of the unit. Layout is a loaded topic, so I have a few things to cover here, and we're going to start with the hallways. There are a few people who want to have a separation from the living space when you enter the unit. So like a small hallway where you can put your shoes, leave your jacket, and kind of enter from there. However, when you have long, winding hallways that take up a lot of room, they typically serve no purpose other than to make the unit possible from the floor plate. When an architect has to design units and they have a quota to stick in 7 units on the same floor, some units you have to do hallways in order to get into the corner when you're separating it like that. Because you're paying on a price per square footage basis in condos, you're paying for space that you're not going to use. And on paper, the unit seems larger than it actually is. I personally like when you enter into the unit, you're straight in the living room, you're right there, boom, ready. A lot of people do want that separation, and that's also fair. But be wary of long, narrow, and windy hallways. The next point is, where does your TV and dining room table go? Let's be honest, in Toronto condos, dining room table is a luxury and most of the people won't have that, so we can scratch that part. Let's just go by the TV and couch, okay? You want to have 2 parallel walls where you can have a couch facing directly to the TV. When you have such a layout where the TV has to be one way and the couch has to be like this, people make it work. I see it happen in staging all the time, but people get weirded out by it all the time and they don't like it. If you have a layout that has a little corner because that's the nook that you enter to the balcony from, and again, you have this cut-off space where you have to kind of block a door or have the couch stick out or your TV stick out, people don't like that either. So you want to have 2 parallel walls. Even if there's a window on one of the walls because you have a corner unit, that's okay. But that is so important for people. People like their TVs. Next, we have diagonal or rounded walls. Don't get me wrong, I love the beauty of certain buildings, the rounded ones. We have all shapes and sizes in Toronto, but they are not very practical from the inside of the unit perspective. If you have a 2,000 square foot unit and you don't have to put a couch against the wall because you have all this space to roam around, by all means, rounded walls, diagonal walls, no problem. But when you have small micro units, we're talking like 300 square feet, 400, 500, 600 even, and you have diagonal walls going towards the kitchen, they're weird. It's hard, and people get very, very uncomfortable with those from my personal experience. Same thing with a lot of the smaller units these days, where the kitchen that goes along the wall goes all the way until the window, and then that's the end of the unit. I'm going to pull up some of those layouts for you so you can see what I mean. But if you have that kitchen going all the way, and then you have an internal bedroom, and then you just have a parallel wall where you could potentially put a couch, but it faces the kitchen, what do you do with that? People make it work, don't get me wrong, but it's not the best, usually. Next up is columns. Sometimes there's nothing you can do about columns. They're needed in order to support the weight of the building. I get it, it's fine. By the way, with pre-construction, the developer can move columns and add columns at will, so you don't always know where the columns are gonna go, and you can't do anything about them placing columns. And I've seen living rooms with 2 columns and they're not placed in the corners. They're kind of like right in the middle, and it just looks weird and uncomfortable. So columns are not something that people like, especially in smaller 600, 500 square foot units. Let's just say people are not very fond of them. Another interesting point with layouts to take note of is the cabinetry and the storage. These days, a lot of the condos will come with very, very little to no storage. In my personal condo, I have over 800 square feet of space, but didn't realize to check. We have the shallowest cabinetry in the kitchen, that if you have a hot pot or a big pot to put and store into those cabinets, they don't fit. And the final point is the location of the unit in relationship to the floor plate. Units that are directly adjacent or in front of the garbage chute are less desirable because they are perceived to come with the smells and the sounds of what you typically expect with the garbage chutes. And units that have doors or exits that face directly into the elevators are also typically perceived to be a little bit less desirable because you're not getting that same privacy. You're exiting the elevator and people see who you are and which unit you live in. A lot of people are uncomfortable with that. So here you have it. Here are the 7 points to consider when you're looking at a unit that goes slightly above and beyond the rest, that will help your unit be resilient to the market fluctuations and will help you sell faster and for more money in any market condition. And if you found this video helpful, check out this video next.